Hi, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro. Thank you for joining me for this talk today for the AWS Toronto group. Today is February 26th, and this talk is around security on AWS. And the idea is to kind of give you a fast track or a good overview of security services that you should be thinking about that's going to help you in your day-to-day use with AWS. I do want to point out that this talk is geared around the security specialty certification. So I have engineered this talk to cover things that are covered in this particular exam. So there are a lot more AWS services that are in the scope of security, but these are the core ones that AWS wants you to care about. And here, these are all the things that we're going to cover here. And some of them are in combination with each other or grouped based on similarity in terms of functionality. But we have KMS, Cloud HSM, CloudTrail and Athena, GuardDuty and Macys, AWS Inspector Artifact, WAF and AWS Shield, Systems Managers, Stored Params, and its unpopular cousin, AWS Secrets Manager. And we'll talk about each of these things as we get to them, okay? So the first thing we're going to cover is KMS Key Management Service. And so as the name implies, it manages keys. And the cost of each key is about $1 each. So as long as you're not making hundreds of keys, you won't be spending hundreds of dollars, but generally you can have good reusability for a few keys in your account. It's important to note that KMS is an HSM, which is a hardware security module. It's a physical piece of hardware that manages keys, and all the keys are held within memory, so they're never written to disk. And if that machine were to die, those keys would be gone. But there are ways of recovering it. But there's another service that we're going to cover after this, which is Cloud HSM. And the key difference between KMS and Cloud HSM is KMS is a multi-tenant HSM, meaning it's running on servers with other people that are utilizing them on AWS. So if you want to go even more secure, you can use Cloud HSM. But the key important thing to know about KMS is that it integrates with a lot of AWS services, which I'll show you here. And with the flick of a switch, you can start encrypting a bunch of different things in AWS. So here in the top left corner, we have an S3 bucket where I'm applying my own KMS key. And then here in Systems Manager's parameter store, I'm applying a key to a secret. And here in EBS, which is Elastic Block Storage for, it's like a hard drive for your EC2 instance, we can encrypt the volumes. And you can integrate with multiple other services, which we won't get into in this section, but we'll see more things that we can encrypt with KMS throughout this talk here. So I just want to set up a scenario for you just to give you a practical example of how you could use KMS. And actually, this is an example, the way I used to encrypt the sensitive data for my application. So if you have a web application, there's probably data in there like the password to the database or generated out keys from other third-party services that you're using that you need to keep secure. And so what you might do is store that configuration file in S3 and then pull it onto your EC2 instance. But just as another layer of security, you want to make sure that that file in S3 is definitely secure, and you can use KMS to ensure that only the people that should be allowed to access that file, such as the EC2 instance itself or privileged people within your organization that might need to update that file, can have access to it. So here I'm creating a new key in KMS. And the key thing I gotta stop saying key because it's such an easy thing to say, but the key thing to point out here is that you can use a key generated by AWS, so they provide the material, or you can import your own. So like when you are setting up your key to log into GitHub, you might have done this before where you've generated with SSH keygen and you have a private and public key. Well, the idea is that if you want to generate your own key and import it, and then you would have to manage a part of that key locally, you can do so to have more control over your key management. But I do recommend that if you can, just let AWS do all the work for you. But there are trade-offs in terms of security, in terms of rotation, stuff like that. But anyway, I've gone ahead and created this key. And the next thing I want to do is define who's allowed to administer this key. I can't remember if that means they're allowed to view the key, so I think you might have to add them again so they can view it. But the idea is that you have administrators and people that are privileged to actually encrypt and decrypt the key. So there is a bit of a separation there where you might have your lead DevOps, SysOps person that has to create a key for people, but that person doesn't need to actually see the contents of that key, but they do have to say who's allowed to encrypt and decrypt that key, right? And so now that we have a key created and we're saying who's allowed to use it, we can go ahead and encrypt that key in S3. And so now if those other users log in with their accounts, they should be able to download that key and decrypt it. It should automatically just allow them download because it will talk to KMS. No need to pass anything around. And then if we want to be able to allow our EC2 instance to pull that encrypted file, we need to add that. We have to add the role. So we created a role for our EC2 instance and attach it to this the key policy for that key. And then here in the actual server, you can see that I'm pulling the application YAML file, which is our configuration file for our web app, and I'm not specifying any parameters. AWS just knows to use the key in our account, which is really nice. So it's that easy to start using KMS. And so now I want to touch on Cloud HSM for a moment. So there are cases where Cloud HSM makes sense. There's this security standard called FIPS 140-2 level 3. I don't remember what it means, but I know that some organizations, especially enterprises, might have this as a requirement because they might not trust multi-tenant hardware, and so they want it running on dedicated hardware, and they also want this standard. And so AWS can do that. You can press a button and they will set you up your dedicated HSM. There are limitations when using Cloud HSM. There's more manual labor involved, but it's still much easier than buying your own rack and installing it yourself and dealing with it. And so the cost here per month is around $1,000, $1,500. It's going to change based on region, but it's still more convenience than if you had to do it yourself. So that's Cloud HSM. And so now the next service I want to move on to is CloudTrail. So CloudTrail is a very useful service. And when you start having more people in your organization or more developers working, you might run into a situation and say, like, who did what? Why is this thing the way it is? And CloudTrail is very good at determining who you should blame in your organization. So, I had a client come back to me and there was a server spun up, a very expensive server, and they were wondering who spun it up. And so through CloudTrail, I was able to determine that. So here we're in CloudTrail, and CloudTrail is turned on by default in AWS. So if you're already collecting information on it, you can create trails that narrow down the specific information that you might want to focus on. But the point is that you get the last 90 days of events in CloudTrail here. So here I'm filtering out my name to see what I've been up to, but you could filter this out to see, say, instead of my username, say like, did anyone spin up these certain sets of instances? Did someone, create new resources or destroy resources? It's very useful for determining that. And there's some important options to know about CloudTrail that you should definitely know about, such as the fact that, well, first of all, when you create a trail, it might be only applicable to a specific region, but if you want to track everything across all regions, you can do so. Also, if you have multiple accounts set up in an organization, you want to track everything across everything, you can tick box apply trail to my organization. And so now we're getting total coverage across all of our accounts, all in one place. Okay, and CloudTrail delivers these events to an S3 bucket. So it is really nice to be able to explore event history here, but we don't always have this interface available to us. And so see here it says can't find what you're looking for, run advanced queries in Amazon Athena. We're going to show you that example because you don't always have access to all of your event data here and explore it in this nice filter interface. But we'll just proceed further here because I want to talk about a few other options that you can do in CloudTrail, such as ensuring that people do not tamper with the log file. So this is a scenario, especially on the security exam, where they're talking about, okay, you have these CloudTrail logs, but you have someone that is with malicious intent that has gained access to your account and they're trying to cover your tracks. Well, one place where they'd have to cover their tracks is CloudTrail, right? And so if So AWS has a way of mitigating this issue, which is enable log file validation. Also, you'll see it called log file integrity validation. So it ensures that nobody's tampered with those log files. So that's that edge case taken care of for you there. Now, I do want to point out that CloudTrail does integrate with CloudWatch. CloudTrail and CloudWatch are two confusing services because they both log stuff. And so sometimes you think, well, why can't this stuff log to CloudWatch? And it kind of can. So there's this feature under CloudTrail where if you tick this button, it will send CloudTrail events to a CloudWatch log, and then it will allow you to create some metrics. And so I'm just going to show you kind of what's going on here. So actually this is me configuring it, and then after the fact I press the button. So I press the button here to configure it, and it's created a log group here. It's created a role, and now it's saying, hey, do you want to create a CloudFormation template? And to set up all these automated ways that we can give you some good defaults for monitoring your CloudTrail stuff, because you might wonder, like, what should I monitor for CloudTrail in an automated way? And so here I pressed this button here, and it allowed me to spin up a CloudTrail template, and it created all these alarms. And so, I was saying earlier, like, what would happen if someone spinned up a large EC2 instance? So this integration here allows you to spin up an alarm and a bunch of other useful alarms. So say, hey, did someone spin up a large instance that we weren't expecting? You better email us because we don't want to get overbilled because of that mistake. So it's nice to have this easy integration in here, but this integration only covers a certain amount of things that you can do. And so if you want a more customizable way to create like automated alerts or do something with that CloudTrail data, we're going to have to move on to Athena. So Athena is another service by AWS, and I believe it's powered by Presto because it has this SQL syntax thing. And the idea is that all your CloudTrail data is stored in an S3 bucket. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a way we could analyze it in an SQL-like way? Well, that's what Athena does. And so here we have a scenario. We're saying, like, how can we use Athena to analyze CloudTrails for suspicious behavior? And let's set up that scenario. So we have someone that is using the console. They're using it on their mobile phone. They're not within our network, and they're doing it at a weird time of night. And so based on these conditions, we could consider that this person is up to some sneaky behavior. And so the idea here is that we have this query, and it's checking for logins during a certain amount of time based on certain IPs, and it's going through all those CloudTrail logs, and we could have thousands of them, and it's going to then take the results of that query, just as if you were querying a database, and output it to an S3 bucket. So the idea is, here we have CloudTrail, right? So CloudTrail already writes to S3, and then the idea is that we use Athena to then analyze that data in that S3 bucket for CloudTrail. Then it outputs its own value into an S3 bucket, which could trigger a Lambda function that could analyze it, and then based on what it considers, you code that logic in, right? Whether it's good or bad, send an SNS message to whoever's in charge to say, hey, there's something really weird going on. Maybe we should need to take action. So that's the big pipeline here with Athena. But generally, whenever you want to do something with CloudTrail, you're going to probably end up using Athena and do this kind of stuff here. But we do have some CloudWatch options and some basic things built in to work with CloudTrail, which is pretty darn nice. So moving on from CloudTrail, let's talk about GuardDuty and Macys. The reason I group these two together is because they're easily confused, because they do similar things. So both use machine learning and they analyze logs. That's the similarity of them. But the result of that machine learning and what you want to do is different. So GuardDuty is about analyzing DNS and flow logs, and Macys is about analyzing things in your S3 bucket, and I think CloudTrail logs as well here. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty certain that's what it does. And so here I want to show you GuardDuty. So I turned GuardDuty on my account. I think it's pretty inexpensive to run. I don't even have to think about it. And so, I have a couple of smaller EC2 instances that I'm running. And those EC2 instances, I left the port 22 open over here. So, when you spin up an EC2 instance, you can say, okay, who's allowed to actually connect? From what IP are they allowed to SSH from? And if you set it publicly available, you're going to start seeing that there's malicious people out there that are already trying to brute force into your EC2 instance. So this is a very good way for me to set up some example data. So That's why it's very important in your security groups to always specify exactly who should have access, not just set it up to the internet. But it's just cool to start seeing people are trying to brute force. They're never going to get into this instance because I use a key, which I have, and that's the only way to get in via SSH. But it's nice to see who's trying to break in. And so that was analyzing our VPC and flow logs. And so there's a multitude of information. This is an easy, no-brainer thing. Just turn it on. And so in order to take advantage of this, I guess, is that GuardDuty is analyzing your VPC flow logs. So I think it matters if I don't know if you have to have things in front of a load balancer. I think if you have EC2 instances, it probably watches the networking cards, because that's, I think, where that stuff is logged. But anyway, the point is, no brainer. You should turn on this feature. It's a great feature to monitor for your servers, just to see if something fishy is going on. I do want to point out that you might want to whitelist, or if you know of malicious IP addresses. So like, let's say you know that you have a competitor and maybe they're across, like you have an idea exactly their IP addresses or whatever, and you suspect that they might be up to something nasty, then you would put them in the list here. Or let's say you just have unusual traffic because you're testing your application and you want to whitelist your own networks just so that it's just not suspicious. You can go ahead and do that in GuardDuty. Well, let's move on to Macys. So Macys, as I said, it's very S3 focused. And so one of the key things to point out here in S3 is, I think this is useful. It's like, you can detect whether a role or a user has been making a history of strange API calls that should be monitored closely for signs of account compromise. So I guess that is CloudTrail. So it's analyzing CloudTrail using machine learning, and it's deciding whether there's some just strange behavior here. And they classify the behaviors based on like platinum, gold, silver, bronze. I think platinum is the worst and bronze is the like the least to worry about. But the idea is it allows you to focus on, say, okay, what users in my account might be, and maybe they're not doing something malicious, maybe they just it's just poor practices. And so it helps you narrow down on the users that you should focus on within your organization, right? To make sure that there's no funny business going on. There is alerts under Macys here, and there's a big list of here just to kind of give you a picture of what Macys could be doing with those CloudTrail logs or other S3 things. Some interesting ones like ransomware. I'm pretty sure Macys will also look at the contents of an S3 bucket and determine if there's any like data in there that might be sensitive that you may not want to share, like passwords or stuff. So yeah, I think those are the two things I usually think of Macys, which is analyzing CloudTrail logs to say what users might be up to some. But you saw we had Athena earlier, right? So we could probably replicate this with Athena, but it's just the idea is that the work is done here for us. Okay. So, but that's pretty much Macys. So let's move on to AWS Inspector and Artifact. I grouped these two together as well because they both generate PDF reports. So this is another people get confused about quite a bit because they both generate reports, but they generate reports for different things. So Inspector does it because AWS Inspector actually runs a bunch of security checks or a benchmark on your EC2 instances, and it produces a security report saying like how hardened is your EC2 instance. Artifact is just it generates a report based on certain compliances that you might want to prove that AWS does uphold. And so we'll show this to you here. First, jumping into Inspector. So here we're on Inspector on the beautiful dash, the home page here. And we'll go in here and I want to show you here I'm in Inspector and I have the options of running a network assessment or host assessment. It's important to post out the host assessment has a sweet CIS benchmark. I think CIS stands for Center of Internet of Security. And so they have this benchmark of 699 tests that they can test against your EC2 instance. This is really the reason why you want to use Amazon Inspector is because of the CIS test. And so for this to actually run against your EC2 instance, it does install an agent, but it installs that automatically. So you're supposed to have the Inspector agent, but through Systems Manager run command, as soon as you press run, if it's not on your EC2 instance, it should try to install it, assuming that you have a compatible OS that works with System Manager, okay? But anyway, I go ahead here and I press run once, and it runs a multitude of tests. These are the rules, the packages of tests that it will run. The one that we really care about is the CIS Operating Security Configuration Benchmark, which has over 699 tests. It's insane. And so once this is run, this didn't take very long to run. It took like 2 minutes to run. I'll explain that in a moment. But once it runs, you can go ahead and download the report and look in detail what it's done here. But if you didn't download the report, you go up to findings here and pretty much see the same information. But it would just show you what is of concern. So here I have different levels of severity, and right now we're looking at the medium one, and it's just saying, like, remember we saw in GuardDuty that we weren't supposed to have port 22 reachable from the internet? Well, that's the same complaint here. So there's a bit of overlap in terms of where there's detection, but the point is this is a lot more thorough, 699 things. And just to go back here, you might have noticed that you can run this on a regular basis, okay? So it's not just that you can run it once, you can just have it keep on running every single week to make sure that it's your servers stay compliant. The unfortunate thing that I found out is that Inspector does not support Amazon Linux 2 for these CIS benchmarks. So you know how I was like praising about their 699 tests? Well, I ran this. The reason it took 2 minutes is because it excluded all 609 tests. Because when it came to here, it said, "Oh, using Amazon Linux 2, you can't run these. They're not compatible yet with Inspector," which was such a shame for me because generally Amazon Linux 2 is the newest Linux distribution by Amazon, and there's good reasons to use it, especially from a security perspective. And it's very sad that this has not been supported yet. I'm sure it's coming, but the irony is that if you were to go to the Amazon marketplace, it's produced by CIS, but they already have a hardened Amazon Linux 2 against the benchmark level 1 here. So it's funny that Amazon Inspector doesn't check for Amazon Linux 2, but you can get the hardened image. And so that comes to the next thing where, Inspector covers all this stuff, but let's say you wanted, like, it tells you all the things that you need to do. And if there was 699 things you had to do, you wouldn't necessarily want to manually do that all yourself. So you'd go to the marketplace and see if there's already compliant EC2 instances, which is what I've done here. And you can see it's very inexpensive to become compliant. So here for each EC2 instance, I could be paying an additional $15 to be level 1 compliant for based on the CIS benchmark, which is super, super easy. So a good way of getting started to being super compliant. And so now we're going to move over to Artifact. And so Artifact it has a bunch of different packages that of like compliancy. So like if in Canada, we might care about this one. I don't really know what it's about, but like, maybe if you're a Canadian enterprise and you have to meet the standards for the government of Canada, this thing will prove that AWS meets the compliancy based on this whatever thing. And so here, I'm just accepting the package. I'm going to accept and download it. You're going to download a PDF. You have to open this up in PDF. PDF Acrobat Reader even tells you that because what you have to do is click this little attachment, and then this isn't the actual report. It's telling you that the report's attached inside of this PDF in a weird way. So you go here, click that, you double click this, and now we have 2 files in here. We get a spreadsheet, and we also get this playbook, and this playbook is the actual contents that we want. This is just the playbook, but we want to double click into this thing, which will give us this a security assessment for AWS. And then over here we have, I think it's the same thing. It's just a spreadsheet version. But the point is that if you need to prove compliancy, just see that if it's an AWS artifact, and then just go generate it, and it'll give you these things. And then you can pass that on to the enterprise that you're working with to show that AWS will satisfy the compliancies of these international standards, right? So now that we've moved on, we're done with Inspector and Artifact. Let's talk about WAF, or Web Application Firewall. I actually had a use case for this last week where somebody was trying to scrape data from another service that I maintain, and so it's cool because you can put a firewall in front of your ALB or CloudFront. So I already usually run applications behind a CDN CloudFront or a load balancer ALB. And so the idea is that you go in here and you could set up ACLs. ACLs are access control lists. So it's a bunch of different kind of rules that you can use to filter out certain things. So we noticed that somebody from the US was scraping our data. And so I just wanted to stop or detect. So you say allow, block, or count web requests. So Here I'm just saying, you know what? We don't need anyone using our service from the States. They shouldn't be using it. So I created a rule here and said, block all traffic from the States. You could do this in CloudFront. CloudFront does let you geo-lock out data, but WAF does give you a little bit more control over other kind of conditions that you might want to set. But this is one way. I don't know if you weren't using CloudFront. In this case, I wasn't. I was using load balancer. So this was a way I could lock out everyone from the US because we have Canadian content. We don't need the US looking at it, and somebody was clearly scraping it. So this was a good solution for us. We'll move on to AWS Shield. So AWS Shield is for DDoS mitigation. I've had the unfortunate event of actually dealing with DDoS in the past. So I used to work for a company that was DDoS, and we think it was one of our competitors DDoSing us. There was 3 other people in the space. Everyone went belly up except for us because we got DDoS mitigation in place. And at the time, AWS Shield did not exist. I had to do some funny thing with Route 53, to mitigate traffic. And then we eventually went with a DDoS mitigation provider. But now AWS has DDoS mitigation, and it's free for the for AWS Shield for the first tier. And we can talk about the comparison here. So there's Shield and Shield Advanced. So Shield is free; it's already turned on. It protects against common DDoS attacks like SYN floods and UDP and or UDP reflection attacks. If you need more coverage for different types of attacks, because there's different attacks based on the OSI model layer. So you have 3, 4, and 7 are the most common. And so those are where you're going to see those attacks. And so AWS Shield has full coverage across all those values there. And it does a bunch of other stuff. It's really expensive, $3,000. It's hard for me to buy into that because, I've paid DDoS mitigation like $500, which is still a lot of money if you're a small startup. But, my thought is that it does a lot more actually than that other service I paid $500 for that we needed at the time. And I guess I would think that it would integrate with AWS services, but it still feels really expensive. But if you're a big organization, maybe it's a drop in the bucket, and you would get amazing support around it because AWS would you'd be able to pick up the phone and talk to them about that product, right? So maybe it's not also bad, but if you're more thrifty, there are other products out there that are more inexpensive. And so I believe this is the last section of this talk here, and we're talking about SSM parameter store and secrets manager. So maybe there's a case where you need to store secrets. So earlier, remember I showed you that example where we used KMS to store that configuration file in S3? Well, there's actually a better place to store that, and that's either in parameter store or secrets manager. So parameter store and secret managers are very similar services, and there's a lot of gripe around secrets manager because I think parameter store was kind of like a sleeper hit success for AWS, where they launched the service, it was free, they didn't realize how popular it was going to be, everyone was using it, they're like, okay, how do we make some money? Let's tack on a couple additional features, which are questionable because you can replicate them if you know AWS well enough. Like here, Secrets Manager has automated key rotation via Lambda, but you could just make your own Lambda with parameter store and get that functionality. But it does a few other things. It really integrates well with RDS. So if you want to seamlessly update your RDS passwords, super good for that. So that's one really good reason to use Secrets Manager. And it has this multiple key value store. I'll show you this shortly because parameter store only stores like one value, okay? But you can see that if you it's very easy for secrets to stack up. So this is the issue with Secret Manager. It might not seem like a lot, 40 cents. Canadian, it's a little bit more. That's why I show 50 cents here. But it might not seem like much, but you might have 20, 30 passwords. And so that cost adds up very quickly. And there is also usage cost as well, but it's like in the 10,000s or whatever. So it's not something you're going to hit very quickly here. But I mean, I guess the cost is mitigated from this key value store, but we'll show you here. Starting with parameter store, okay? So jumping over to parameter store, you have this thing where you do / notation to name it, because there's like ways where if you want to grab your keys, it's like this kind of hierarchy structure. I don't know how to explain it very well, but the point is that there is a, if you have a lot of passwords, you can organize them and filter out the keys that you want. So if you need so if you had database and there's like, I could say database / password, database / username here. I don't know why I didn't do that here, but if I just want to grab everything under the database and I get production exam pro database, I think there's some synergies with the CLI, the AWS CLI to grab that stuff. We have 3 options here: string, string list, secure string. Secure string is KMS. I showed that in an earlier screenshot here, but I just wanted to show you the key here, but we could use KMS with this. And so here I'm storing the password to this fictitious database called Show Me the Money. And so that's a database password. And so that was parameter store. And so I just actually want to show you in Secrets Manager. So here we're doing the same thing in Secrets Manager, and we're setting an RDS password. And so actually it does the username and the password. So here we have Jerry Maguire, which is the movie, which makes sense for this quote. And here we have Show Me the Money, and we're selecting our RDS database, and it's that easy to rotate. And I think this will automatically rotate, and it'll just automatically apply to our database. So it's super, super easy to manage database passwords through Secrets Manager. So that's one of the benefit of Secrets Manager. That'd be like only the one reasons you'd ever use the service. I just want to show you the key value thing. So you could, so just as you saw in parameter store, it's a single string value here. You could, in Secrets Manager, have this secret key value. So this is kind of a way of saving stuff, because sometimes you want to group this stuff together. So I talked about earlier having database /username /password / whatever you want here, but this is just the same way of grouping it. But like when you can filter based on that, you don't really need this. But anyway, you can apply KMS encryption to this key value store thing, and so those options are available to you. I also do kind of want to show you here Secrets Manager key rotation. So that's that Lambda function. You still have to hook it up to your own Lambda. I think you have to write your own Lambda too. So it's not really that much easier than using parameter store and just setting it up yourself, because this basically replaces a CloudWatch event to whatever, but it's there for you. And so that's the scope of this talk here. And I just want to end this with showing you off all the different types of workshops that we do have with ExamPro. So we do run workshops in downtown Toronto, and this is based on, we might be doing this on a regular monthly basis, just so it encourages people to join these or sign up for these workshops. But generally you can just send us an email, and as we collect enough, then we will schedule a workshop downtown. And we have them in two formats. We have ones for beginners and one for professionals. So we have all the same 4 workshops, where this one will be more of an introduction to this. So we might not cover exactly everything in here. And then professionals will cover everything, and then answer specific questions to your needs. So the idea is here, professionals is just, it's more grueling. It's over 2 days, and it's very thorough. So maybe there's a very specific use case, but if you're just trying to jump in and learn this stuff and get a good handle on this stuff, then we do have that beginner's option for you. And the 4 that we have is end-to-end web app development. We have mastery of microservices, very popular. People really love microservices. There's a lot of different ways to deploy those on AWS, and we show you every single way, just so that you're confident of what option you want to choose, because nobody realizes there's like 4 different ways to deploy. Static website hosting, which might not sound that cool, but there's actually a lot of stuff you can do with CloudFront. It's insane. So on ExamPro, like we serve up streaming video files through CloudFront, and they have to be secured. I remember I spent over a week figuring that out with the CloudFront team. Very difficult thing to do. So this might sound trivial, but there's actually a lot of good value in here. And the idea is that it's at scale, right? So if you want a website that's going to handle millions and millions of hits, and you want to have rich data around what's going on there, there's a lot of caked in stuff in AWS, which is really, really cool. And then the last one's going serverless, which is really just a fun workshop where you don't have to deal with servers. You create Lambda functions, and we use a DynamoDB. The focus is around a serverless contact form, but we break it up into multiple Lambdas so that we have an opportunity to use step functions, which kind of gives you an indication of how you'd build an entire web application just using serverless functions, and also debugging, which is a huge challenge for people that want to do serverless. And so besides X-Ray, we do have other things we can show you how to do debugging, but that's generally the biggest obstacle for people getting into serverless. So yeah, thank you for joining me for this talk, and I really hope you learned something today.